Support for this program is provided by
The Women's Hospital delivers comprehensive health care to women and infants through inpatient and outpatient obstetrical, gynecologic, and education programs. The Women's Hospital, only at Deaconess.
additional support provided by Girling Law and Toyota Indiana.
Yes, we're talking about health issues, but it's deeper than that. How it affects us emotionally, how it affects our life and maybe our partners or the people around us. Ashley is a young woman, newlywed, and was experiencing some pain during intercourse, which was so hard for her to deal with because she's newlywed and she can't have intercourse with her husband. And she talks about what that journey's like and how that makes her feel. And then you have Robin, and she shares her journey with menopause through us and how to age with grace. And I love listening to her story because it gives me something to look forward to.
Early in our marriage, I knew the pain was an issue. As I said, it was getting progressively worse. It makes you feel kind of incompetent. Like, how can I be married and not be able to have sexual intimacy? I felt like not a good wife. I felt like less of a woman. That's something that everyone's supposed to be able to enjoy. We communicated about the pain I was having and bleeding and things like that. And it wasn't so painful that we couldn't have sex, but that was concerning to him. He said, I don't want it to hurt. It's not supposed to hurt. And so as that went on, my doctor was really helpful in getting me on the path to recovery.
People come to the pelvic clinic to see me to address issues that are otherwise difficult to address at a family practice physician, or sometimes even difficult to address at their gynecologist, depending on who they see. I think it's sometimes easier for them to talk to a female versus a male, and a lot of physicians are male. So painful intercourse, vaginal dryness, heavy periods, painful periods, postmenopausal issues, interstitial cystitis, which is a form of chronic pelvic pain. When we think of pelvic health, it can be anyone. It can be a teenager all the way up to postmenopausal. We all have a pelvis, and it can bother us at any point in our life, and it can start as young as puberty all the way, through being postmenopausal, and it can bother us for different reasons. So I think I want people to be very aware of that and not be afraid to ask for help.
The first thing that we tried was to treat the symptoms of pain. Didn't really know the root cause. My doctor said she suspected vulvodynia was my diagnosis. So vulvodynia is pain in the vulva area. It can be because of clothing you wear. It can be only during intercourse. The pain can be caused by a multitude of different things. And so we tried a lot of things, changing the type of clothes I wore. Maybe, not wearing tight clothes would help. We went down the path of pain management type thing. Vaginal Valium, I learned was a thing. Tried that, it didn't work. Tried an estrogen cream, and I felt uncomfortable being on a hormone at my age. We tried lidocaine as a topical treatment for the pain, and that was a fail because it was that I couldn't feel anything. So then what's the point? Because you're just going through the motions just because that's what's supposed to happen. Finally, we decided, let's try something else. Let's try to treat, maybe find a different cause. And so she referred me to Pelvic Health and Wellness, and I have a physical therapist there named Erica. And what we figured out was the reason that it progressively became painful over time was because of scar tissue, and that's why I would see the bleeding happening. So I had this aha moment of, well, it makes sense why I felt like that my vagina was like closing up, it was getting smaller, because the scar tissue kept building. And she said the longer that you go between intercourse, it's gonna have more time to lay down that scar tissue. And so since it was painful, we would go like periods of time without having sex. And that you think it's helping because it's painful, but really the scar tissue had so much more time to stay there and not be attended to. And so that explained a lot of questions I had had about the bleeding, the pain, why it became worse over time. And so at the physical therapy, after they kind of did the initial assessment, it was found that I had weak muscles, and also that my brain was interpreting pain and where it shouldn't.
When we have pain with intercourse, and it's the muscle and connective tissue that's causing a big part of the problem, what we notice on exam is that the tissues are not gliding and moving like they should. So there is tissue that covers the muscle, very much like your skin covers your elbow. And if that skin didn't move on your elbow, you wouldn't be able to bend that elbow, right? So when we're having intercourse, if the skin is sort of stuck down onto the muscle wall, when your partner penetrates you, it breaks those connective tissue adhesions that are holding that skin to the muscle. And when that happens, number one, it hurts, and we react and we tense. And when we tense, it actually creates a smaller opening, which is going to create more friction. And when it creates more friction, it creates more inflammation, because now we have sort of a wound. And the unfortunate part, when we have one incident of intercourse or pain with intercourse, our brain remembers that, and we start developing a little mini file in the brain that says intercourse is painful. So when we have intercourse again, the body's going, oh, and gearing up, and it's going to gear up by tensing instead of relaxing. And if we're not relaxing those muscle tissues, they're not going to stretch effectively, and we're going to break that connective tissue again, creating yet another wound. And then that's going to heal, and it heals by laying down more scar tissue. So then whenever you have intercourse again, and it's just a vicious cycle.
We really weren't already having sex anyway, and so it was just kind of like an added timeline of not having sex, but it was still like, oh, more of this, how long is this going to take? You kind of get to a point where you're like, how many more steps are we going to take before we find a cure or a treatment plan that works? I was super skeptical about going to physical therapy because I thought, oh, is this really going to work? Well, it did. I went once a week for probably 3 months, maybe a little longer. Throughout that time, I had things that I had to do at physical therapy. Like I said, she would do manual work trying to build up like muscle tone. She said my tone was weak and strength, and so it was trying to fix those issues, as well as knowing that it isn't going to be painful. Everything doesn't have to be painful in that area. And so that really helped. At home, I had to do my part also with the physical therapy. And so she recommended I use dilators, which I don't really know how to describe them other than they look like plastic dildos. And you progressively go from a small size, and you insert it and you wait 10 minutes. So over time, you size up to the next dilator, and then you're able eventually, with the doctor's okay, you can move back into trying intercourse after that. And it worked. We were able after that to have sex. And now, since I've been released from physical therapy, the pain kind of has returned, but not like, if I'm still dilating, then it's okay. I'm supposed to still either have intercourse or dilate 3 to 4 times a week. And so it's not that anything went away or is cured. It's just I have kind of a plan in place to manage it.
So I guess the message that we're trying to relay is that women don't have to live like this. And we see so many women who come in and think they're alone, and to know that they're not alone. There are many women that have this problem. You're just not talking about it. So to know that it can be so simple when someone has lived with pain with intercourse for months, if not years, and they come in and in 1 week or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, it's completely gone. They want to kick themselves that they didn't do it sooner. So I think, the fact that it is muscle tissue and it is correctable and they don't have to live with it. And it does change a lot of things. It's not just pain, but it can also help the relationship.
Why me? Like, why does my body not work like everybody else's? Why am I different? And I know there's far worse things, but I always wondered, what was wrong with me, because it was very strange how it happened and it progressed. I don't know.
And it's such an intimate place in a woman's body.
It is, and it's hard to talk about. I mean, at first I felt very uncomfortable going to the doctor and saying, I have pain during intercourse. We're not ever told how to speak to doctors about this type of thing. And even though I'm going to my female OBGYN, it's not a comfortable subject, because a lot of times, I don't know, it's just hard to talk about to your doctor who, you have a relationship with them, but it's not the easiest thing to discuss. Even when you need to go to the doctor, it's easy to just put it off. And since I expected it to get better on its own, we didn't have it addressed right when it started. And then as it progressed, Michael's like, you really need to go to the doctor. And it's like, okay, let's do this. And then started that cycle. And that lasted a year from beginning to end, just over a year, just trying to find an answer even. It was a hard process to go through, because I really thought this only happened to older women, and I didn't expect it to be a problem until I was much into menopause or later in life. It really caused Michael and I to really look at our relationship differently. How can we be close without that physical intimacy? Or, what other ways are there? I mean, it was just a trying period for our marriage, but definitely I think it happened for a reason. I think it made us stronger in the end. And even though I wouldn't necessarily wish this on anyone, I'm glad it happened, because it made us really rely on each other in different ways other than just sex.
The treatment, first of all, is just evaluating the problem, because there are some simple solutions to pain with intercourse, but there are some patients who have additional problems that we need to investigate and further treat. But if it's pain with intercourse and it's a connective tissue, muscle tissue issue, oftentimes it's a matter of doing some manual therapy, and it's done by one of our female therapists who's well educated in the process of doing that, and we explain everything along the way. Many of the women who come to us, they're a little hesitant. Their body language, they're kind of cross and like, I don't know what I'm doing here. This is weird. It's not weird. It's a muscle tissue. It's just hidden. It's in a different spot. I know it's an intimate spot, but it is something very treatable. And once you understand how that works, we really don't get any pushback.
I cried when I got released, because I'm like, she fixed me. I know it sounds crazy, but I felt like I really got to know everybody at the office, and I thought, I don't want to keep going here, but I'm going to miss the people, because they changed me. I didn't think I could get better. And knowing that there was a path for me to get better, that just made all the difference for me. Someone needs to hear this. Someone needs to know that young people can have things wrong with them that aren't just how it's supposed to be. Or, I think our society tells us that sex is supposed to feel good for the man, and whatever's going on with the woman is kind of secondary. And so I don't think people are as apt to go speak to a doctor about these issues. So I thought it was important to share this.
Menopause is when the ovaries stop producing estrogen. The ovaries do produce about 98% of the estrogen in our bodies. We do have a couple other sources of estrogen, but for the most part, when the ovaries stop functioning, that's what menopause. So the definition is no more periods.
So when you don't have estrogen in your body, kind of what are the side effects typically?
Well, generally hot flashes, night sweats, moodiness, irritability, trouble sleeping, trouble concentrating, vaginal dryness can all be symptoms, and there's a spectrum of that. Some women have those symptoms, some have no symptoms, some have severe symptoms. So some have symptoms as the estrogen is dropping, some have symptoms after the estrogen has been gone for a long time. So they can come and go for different situations. Stress can bring on symptoms. Changes in weight, more than 5 to 10 pounds gaining or losing, sometimes can make those symptoms come on. So some people, had no symptoms when they went through menopause, and then all of a sudden they start having them and they have questions about that. So generally those are things that I ask about what's going on in your life right now. The biggest question is, when am I postmenopausal? When am I done? I mean, once you are in menopause and the ovaries are no longer producing that estrogen, either because they've been removed or because they've stopped working on their own, then that next phase is postmenopausal. So really menopause is a single time, and then you're the premenopausal or postmenopausal.
My mother had a hysterectomy when she was a little over, I think, 32. And so I had no reference point in terms of what to expect, because there are some familial traits that get passed on. So I didn't know what to expect. But for me, around 43, I started skipping periods. And it was pretty astonishing. I started skipping periods. I'm not even sure if I thought of that as a symptom, but just as like, oh, this is interesting. And I had had my tubes tied many, many years before, so I knew it wasn't an issue with conception, thankfully. But I stumbled into a women's group led by a hippy-dippy nurse practitioner. This was back in my NorCal days. And it was about women's hormones and just rituals around women aging. And in my mid-40s, I thought, okay, well, I am aging. And as women went around the room and were talking about their symptoms, one that just floored me was mental fogginess. So I'm a health educator. I had been teaching classes on a regular basis, and I noticed in my teaching that at times words would escape me, theories or pieces of information that I had been imparting regularly that I knew lived close in my brain. When I heard from other women, some younger, some older, that mental fogginess was a really common symptom that comes with hormonal changes, I was really surprised by that.
One of the other things that was really remarkable that wasn't emphasized when I was in training was this fog that women go through. And so women who had been in power positions in their lives now were forgetting things or didn't seem in control. And when you stop losing control, that's a scary thing. It doesn't mean that you have to be out of control, because we find ways to get around that. But I think that's part of aging. I think whether you're a man or a woman, that when you don't feel in control of either your mind, your body, or your spirit, those are things that are scary.
That resonated with me, and I began to pay attention, thinking, gosh, 43, starting to skip periods, although it would be like a month, and then I'd have 5 months of periods and then skip another. So obviously this went into, my mid-40s. And around like 47-ish, I experienced the only other symptom that I've ever had, and that was a change in the plumpness of my vaginal tissue. I have not ever had hot flashes. I have not ever had trouble with my sleep, no mood issues, no fatigue issues. But that was the one change. and making love began to be somewhat uncomfortable, totally unacceptable to me. And my husband, although he's such a love, he was, patient and didn't have any, complaints, but didn't feel any different to him actually. But so I found this fabulous nurse practitioner in closer to Sacramento, bigger city area. And to this day, she still treats me from afar, meaning she keeps my prescriptions going, but she works with bioidenticals. I know there's tons of controversy around that, but they work for me. She prescribed a simple estrogen, very, very low dose vaginal cream that worked marvelously. And for like 3 more years, I kind of forgot about this menopausal issue. Things were great. Things were, my one symptom of that little bit of discomfort was alleviated, and I went on my merry way. And like all good things, I either built up a tolerance, or as my hormones continued to deplete, and we went up to the next dose, a little bit stronger estrogen, that gave me another little reprieve. And over the years, we've been tweaking it, and so I'm adding a couple different forms of estrogen, and I'll be 60 in a couple months. So it's been many years now. I would say that the hormones work, maybe 60%. I mean, it meaning that there's some benefit, but not nearly as much as I had in my younger years.
Estrogen kind of got a bad rap. And when studies came out, and everyone fears estrogen, but really estrogen is good for most tissues in our body. So one of the places that estrogen is good is the vagina. So it makes that tissue thicker. It makes it have folds. So those that thickness in the folds make it has moisture and makes it have some pliability. So when we lose our estrogen, that skin gets thinner. As that skin gets thinner, it gets dry. And then because it doesn't have that stretch, if you're sexually active, that can be painful sex. But even with general urination, you can have burning with urination. You can have that symptom of that plumpness that she's describing there for the vagina.
So the afterglow is still present. So I can assure you of that. I think John falls asleep more quickly than he used to. So I was 37 when John and I fell in love. He was 40. And for years, we said we are going to have rock and roll sex forever until we are way into our 80s. This is good, and it's going to be just this good, and we really believed that. And it was really good for a really long time. And as things change, yes, you either deal with it and be responsible and mature about it. I mean, if he was unkind or unpleasant or petulant about it, that would be awful, but he's not. He's supportive, and so I can't imagine it any other way. And I can't wait to hang out with you in 15, 18 more years and see where you are. Because every woman is different, I'm imagining, and every, of course, man is different. So it may be better and juicier for you for a longer period of time. I sure hope so. But absolutely enjoy it now, because, from an older woman, I can assure you that there will be some slowing down at some level. I think there's a lot of wisdom and maturity that comes with this time of acceptance. And whether I'm just blessed to have that, or whether John and I just keep working at it, together. But yeah, it's a physical lessening of that desire. One thing that has changed a little is a little belly pooch, and they talk about that. It does seem that with hormone changes, regardless of my level of fitness, which has stayed pretty regular, physiologically things change, yes, and gravity does have its effect in spite of what you think is going to happen. It's easy to look at other women younger than myself and absolutely remember when I was that hard body or I looked that way in that kind of dress. And it's an everyday invitation to just immerse myself in self-love. And some days it's much easier than others. You know, we all have our up moments, certainly, and mine are actually mostly up. But there's some times where I feel a twang, like, oh gosh, or you know, John is a photographer. We'll look at pictures even from 5 years ago, and I see a difference, you know, skin tone, and it's like, gosh, that's only 5 years, but I'm getting older, darn it, you know. And so it's a balance, but. I think because we both feel so good and we're energetic and there's so much love from him to me, I feel still very gratified for being in shape and being okay even at almost 60.
I think the really hard part about the whole issue is you get married and everyone starts asking when you're going to have kids. And so, you know, you have that awkward uncle or that friend that's nosy. They want to know, so when are you going to have kids? And I'm thinking, well, would you like to hear about my vaginal disorder? Because that's like how I got at a point where everybody was asking us. And now we've been married 2 years. I think finally people have kind of backed off, but every family function we went to, I was just constantly reminded that you have something wrong with you. Like, I couldn't change that. Everyone asks, when are you gonna have kids? And you can't give them an answer because they don't want to hear an awkward story about your disorder. So you just, you know, you have to get through it with family.
Well, my vagina doesn't work properly right now, so.
Yeah, it's out of commission. Would you like to hear about it?
Support for this program is provided by
The Women's Hospital delivers comprehensive health care to women and infants through inpatient and outpatient obstetrical, gynecologic, and education programs. The Women's Hospital, only at Deaconess.